No matter how much you do, it never feels like enough. You hit the goal and by the next morning it already feels small. You finally get the promotion, and the first thought isn't relief, it's that they're going to find out you don't actually belong there. You watch someone your age announce their engagement or their new title, and something in your chest just sinks. There was a man who ran the most powerful empire that had ever existed and felt exactly this, almost every single night. Wars, a plague, betrayal from men he trusted, and still, alone in his tent, he wrote himself notes just trying to survive his own mind. His name was Marcus Aurelius. In the next half hour, here's what you're getting. Why this feeling never actually goes away no matter what you accomplish. Why it gets sharper specifically in your late 20s and early 30s. And exactly what to replace it with. So the exhaustion of constantly proving yourself finally has somewhere real to go. And it starts with a question Marcus asked himself almost every single morning. What part of today actually belongs to you? Marcus had a way of picturing his own mind like a small fortress. Walls, a gate, a guard standing watch. And the entire practice he wrote down for himself, night after night for years, was about figuring out which walls were genuinely his to defend and which ones he had no business guarding at all. He wasn't a man who had it easy and just decided to feel calm about it. He ran Rome through a war on the Eastern Front that dragged on for years, through a plague that wiped out a staggering portion of his own population, and through the betrayal of a general he had personally trusted with command of half his army. And in the middle of all of that, alone at night, he sat down and wrote these private notes to himself, the ones we now call meditations, with no plan for anyone else to ever read them. Just a man trying to keep his own head straight. Here is the part nobody tells you about that feeling of never being enough. You're not actually failing at the thing you think you're failing at. You're defending walls that were never yours to defend in the first place. Think about what actually happens the next time you feel like a failure. You worked for weeks on something, you showed up early, you double-checked every detail, you genuinely gave it your honest best, and then the client picks someone else, or the market shifts overnight, or your manager's having a brutal week of their own and takes it out on you in a review that has nothing to do with the actual quality of your work. None of that was inside your control. Not one piece of it. But look at what you do with the verdict. You drag it straight into the one part of the fortress that was actually yours. Your effort, your intention, your honesty, and you let an outside result knock that wall down too, as if it were the very same wall. It shows up the same way outside of work. You plan something thoughtful for someone you love. You put real care into it, and they're distracted or having a hard week of their own and barely notice. The instinct is to read that as proof you did something wrong, that you're somehow not enough of a partner or a friend, but the care you put in was the wall that belonged to you. Their bandwidth that day never did, and it never will, no matter how perfectly you plan things around it. Marcus comes back to this exact separation over and over in his notes. What is mine? What is not? The work is mine. The outcome of the work is not. The honesty of the attempt is mine. Whether anyone notices it, rewards it, or even sees it, is not. He writes it almost like a soldier checking a perimeter before sleep, going wall by wall, asking which ones he actually built with his own hands, and which ones he just assumed were his, because losing them felt personal. I think about this every time I catch myself spiraling after an email goes unanswered, or a pitch goes nowhere, or I do everything right in a hard conversation and still watch it fall apart anyway. The instinct is always identical. I did this wrong, I am not enough. But when you actually go back and check, almost every single time, the part that was genuinely yours, the effort, the honesty, the attempt, was completely intact. What collapsed was something that was never under your control to begin with, and somehow you still signed your name to its failure. This is the quiet trap of your 20s and early 30s specifically. It's the first long stretch of life where the scoreboard is loud and constant. Promotions, relationship milestones, who owns what, who's ahead. Earlier in life, most outcomes were at least partly handed to you. Grades, graduations, a clear next step laid out in front of you. Now, almost everything you're measured by depends on forces well outside your hands. An economy, a market, someone else's mood, someone else's timeline. So the temptation to treat every external result as proof of your internal worth is stronger here than it will probably ever be again. This is also exactly the stretch of life where effort quietly stops being about growing and starts being about not getting rejected. You stop taking the new project because you might fail at it publicly. You stop bringing up the hard topic in the relationship because it might confirm you're not enough of a partner. Every attempt turns into a referendum on your worth before you've even started. So the safest move always looks like not trying at all. Marcus never had that option. An emperor doesn't get to quietly opt out of the next decision because the last one went badly. He had to keep tending his post regardless of the outcome, which is exactly the habit this whole video is building toward. So here's something worth sitting with, not in the abstract, but about something real, specific, from your own life. Think of the last time you actually called yourself a failure, out loud or just in your own head. Was it because you genuinely didn't try? Or was it because something completely outside your hands didn't land the way you wanted it to? If it's the second one, you weren't being honest with yourself about whose wall actually fell. This is also where the insecurity comes from that follows you around even after a good outcome. You land the deal, you get the praise, and within a day or two the feeling fades, and the search for the next thing to prove starts all over again. That's what happens when your sense of being enough is parked on a wall that was never yours to control in the first place. It can never hold a permanent flag because the ground underneath it keeps shifting on its own schedule, not yours. The only flag that ever stays planted is the one on the wall you actually built, the effort and the honesty, because that's the only ground that doesn't move depending on someone else's day. Knowing which walls are actually yours explains half of this ache. The other half is hiding somewhere most people never bother to look, right inside the gate itself, where a second guard decides what's even allowed in to hurt you in the first place. Marcus keeps returning to a version of the same line, across years of writing to himself. The idea that people aren't actually disturbed by the things that happen to them. They're disturbed by the opinion they form about those things, and they hand that opinion the keys before they've even checked who it is. Here's what that looks like in real life. You get passed over for a promotion you were sure you'd earned. That's the event, and it happened to you, fully outside your control, exactly like the last section. But the event isn't what actually wrecks your week. What wrecks your week is the sentence you immediately hand yourself behind it. I'm replaceable. I'm not as good as I thought. I'm falling behind everyone my age. That sentence walks straight through the gate like it owns the place, and you let it because it shows up wearing the costume of just being realistic instead of what it actually is, which is an opinion, unverified, often cruel, and almost never examined. It happens just as fast with family. A parent makes an offhand comment about when you're going to settle down or actually commit to something, and the event itself lasts 4 seconds at a dinner table. But the verdict that follows, I'm behind, I'm disappointing them, I've wasted years, can run in the background of your head for months afterward, completely unchecked, doing more damage than the original 4 seconds ever could. Notice what kind of feeling that unchecked verdict actually produces too. It's rarely plain sadness. It's usually shame, the specific heavy sense that the setback exposed something true and embarrassing about who you fundamentally are, not just about one afternoon that went badly. Shame is loud precisely because it claims to be revealing your real self instead of just reacting to a single event. But a verdict that walked in unchecked doesn't get to claim that kind of authority. It's still just an opinion that snuck past the gate, dressed up as a confession. This is exactly how effort quietly turns into self-defense instead of growth. Once enough unchecked verdicts have walked through that gate, you stop trying things in order to build something and start trying things only to avoid another guilty verdict. The work shifts from creation to defense, and defense is exhausting in a completely different way than building ever is. Marcus never describes his own effort as defense. He describes it as tending his post, which is a very different thing to wake up for every single morning. Picture it like there's a guard standing at the inner gate of that fortress, whose entire job is to stop and check every verdict before it's allowed inside to do damage. Is this thing trying to get in actually true, or is it just loud? Is it actually about your worth, or is it about a single outcome on a single day that has nothing to do with who you are? Most of us let the gatekeeper sleep on the job. The verdict just walks straight past him and sets up camp in the middle of the fortress, and within a few minutes, it's redecorating the whole place in its own image, calling itself the truth about you. I had a stretch a few years ago where I lost a project I'd been counting on for months. The event itself probably cost me a few weeks of real inconvenience. But the sentence I handed myself, "You're not cut out for this," cost me almost a year of holding back from trying anything that mattered again. The event was small. The unchecked verdict behind it was enormous, and it kept charging rent long after the event itself was forgotten by everyone except me. Marcus pushes this even further. He says more than once that you have the power to revoke a verdict the second you notice you've made one, the same way you'd have the power to throw out a guard who let the wrong thing through the gate, not by pretending the setback didn't happen, by separating cleanly the thing that happened from the sentence you handed down about your worth because of it. The event gets to stay in the record. The verdict is optional every single time, even after you've already let it in once. So try this with something specific, not theoretical. What's the last sentence you handed yourself after a real setback this month? Word for word, the actual phrase that ran through your head. And here's the part that usually breaks the spell. Would you ever say that exact sentence out loud to someone you genuinely love if they came to you after the same setback? If the answer is no, you already know the gatekeeper was asleep. Even once you catch the gatekeeper in the act, there's still noise coming from outside the walls every single day, other people's progress, paraded right in front of you on a screen you check before you've even gotten out of bed. Marcus had a habit he came back to constantly, almost like a reset button. He'd mentally climb to the top of his own wall and look out, not at the neighboring kingdom, but at the whole shape of time itself. He'd remind himself that entire empires before his had crumbled and been forgotten, that men who once felt as urgent and important as anyone alive today are now just names nobody bothers to look up, if they're remembered at all. Soon, he writes, you'll have forgotten the whole world, and soon the whole world will have forgotten you. That sounds bleak the first time you hear it, but it isn't meant as despair. It's meant as relief. Because if you actually let it sink in, that almost nothing you're frantically comparing yourself against right now will be remembered by anyone in 10 years, including you. Then the tyranny of this one specific milestone you haven't hit yet starts to lose its grip on your chest. Here's where this lands for you specifically. It's 1 in the morning, you're scrolling, and someone your age just announced a thing, the funding round, the wedding, the body, the title, and your stomach does that familiar drop. The feeling that everyone else got further down a road you're somehow still standing at the entrance of. From down on the ground, inside the noise, that one post feels like a verdict on your entire life. But climb up to the top of the wall for a second, the way Marcus did, and look at the actual shape of things. That same person posting tonight will, in a handful of years, have their own version of this exact ache about someone else's life. Everyone on that feed is simultaneously someone else's "they're so far ahead" and someone else's "I feel like I'm falling behind" at the very same moment, just looking in different directions. There's a specific kind of tired that comes from this, different from the tired of doing actual work. It's the tired of running a comparison in the background of almost every hour you're awake, checking your position against 100 other people's curated highlight reels before you've even finished your coffee. That kind of exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from never getting to stand still long enough to just be where you actually are. The view from the wall isn't just clearer, it's restful, because for a moment you've stopped running that background comparison entirely. This hits hardest around your late 20s and early 30s specifically, because that's exactly when the timelines start diverging in public for the first time. In school, everyone moved through the same grades at roughly the same pace. Now your friend group is scattered across completely different timelines. Some married, some still figuring out a career, some neither, and every divergence gets broadcast in real time instead of staying private the way it used to. Marcus never had a newsfeed, but he had something just as relentless, an entire empire's worth of people whose lives he could measure himself against every single day. The wall worked the same way then as it does now. There's another version of the same trick Marcus uses, looking forward instead of back. He imagines himself old, near the end, looking back at the things that consumed him at your age, Try it for 30 seconds. Picture yourself decades from now, looking back at this exact week, this exact comparison that's eating you alive right now. Does the gap between your timeline and someone else's still feel like the most important fact about your 20s or 30s? Or does it start to look like static, noise that felt enormous up close and turned out to be nothing from any real distance at all? From way up there, the specific milestone you're punishing yourself for not hitting yet looks a lot smaller than it does from down inside the scroll. Not unimportant. Just sized correctly instead of inflated by the closeness of the screen in your hand. This doesn't mean stop caring about your life. Marcus cared plenty, he ran an empire, he didn't retreat to a cave to escape the noise. It means stop letting a single comparison, viewed at the worst possible distance, 1 inch from your face, decide what your whole existence is worth. So pull the lens back for a second on something real. Of the 5 things you're most quietly ashamed you haven't achieved yet, the ones that keep you up at night comparing, how many of them will anyone, including you, even remember the exact details of in 10 years? Not the general direction of your life, the exact specific thing you're punishing yourself for tonight. Sit with how short that list actually gets. Here's the part most people skip. Knowing all of this, the walls, the gatekeeper, the view from the top, doesn't actually change anything by itself unless you do what Marcus did with it, every single night without fail. He didn't just think these thoughts once and feel briefly better. He wrote them down. Every night in private with no audience, no plan to publish, just a soldier checking his own perimeter before sleep. What did I do today that was actually mine to control? Where did I let a verdict through the gate that I shouldn't have? What does tomorrow's watch actually require of me? Not in general, but specifically tomorrow morning. That habit is the missing piece for almost everyone stuck in this exact ache. Most of us run our self-evaluation backward. We wait for an outcome, a promotion, a like count, a reply, and then we let that outcome hand down a verdict on our entire worth as a person. Marcus ran it the opposite way. He evaluated the watch, not the weather. Did I stand at my post honestly today? Did I do the actual work in front of me with integrity? That's the only question that ever gets a fair answer, because it's the only question pointed entirely at something you actually controlled. There's a kind of fear hiding underneath this too. The fear that if you actually look honestly at your own effort every night, you'll find out the bad verdict was true after all. That fear is exactly why most people would rather just feel vaguely not enough forever than sit down and check the actual record. But Marcus's nightly habit only works because he wasn't afraid of the log. He trusted that an honest account of his own effort would hold up, even on the nights when the outcomes around him were falling apart completely. The fear gets smaller every single night you actually check, because the data, almost every time, turns out to be more forgiving than the feeling was. This is the whole shift in one sentence. Stop treating each attempt at your work, your relationships, your goals as a verdict on your worth, and start treating it as a single data point in a much longer experiment you're running on your own life. A data point doesn't get a personality. It just gets logged, and then you adjust the next attempt based on what it actually told you, not on how loudly it made you feel. Picture the version of this for your own life, in practice, not just in theory. Instead of ending the day asking, "Was I good enough?" which is a question with no honest answer because it's aimed at 1,000 things you never controlled, you end the day asking something narrower and far more answerable. What did I actually do today with what was mine to control? Did I show up to the hard conversation? Did I send the application even though the outcome is none of my business? Did I tell the truth when it would have been easier not to? Those questions have real answers every single time, and the answers are entirely about you, not about a market, a stranger's opinion, or a result that was never yours to dictate in the first place. This is also why Marcus never sounds like he's congratulating himself or beating himself up in these notes. He sounds like someone collecting data, a log, not a courtroom. Tonight's entry isn't a verdict on his soul, it's information for tomorrow's watch. That shift alone, from verdict to data, is most of the relief this whole video has been building toward. You don't need anything elaborate to actually do this. 3 lines before bed, every night. One thing you genuinely controlled today, fully, start to finish. One place where you caught yourself handing down a verdict on something that wasn't yours to judge. And one thing tomorrow's watch actually requires of you, specifically, not in general. That's the whole practice. No grand insight required each night, just the same 3 lines, repeated until checking your own walls becomes as automatic as checking a lock on a door before you go to sleep. I started doing a version of this a while back, on nights when the day had gone badly by every external measure. A deal that fell through, a message that never got answered. The external measure said, failure. The 3 lines said something different almost every time. They said, I showed up, I told the truth, I sent the thing. That gap between what the outcome said and what the log said is exactly where the exhaustion of constantly proving yourself starts to lose its grip. So tonight, instead of asking yourself if you were enough today, ask the only fair question available to you. What's the one thing you actually controlled today, fully, start to finish, that belongs entirely to you regardless of how anything turned out? Write it down if you can. That's your first entry in the same logbook Marcus kept for years, just to survive being human in a job that never let up. So here's the conflict underneath all of this, named plainly. It was never that you're insufficient. It's that you've spent years keeping score with a measuring stick that was never built for you to hold, outcomes, approval, comparison, while quietly abandoning the only stick that was ever actually yours to use, whether you showed up honestly to what was in front of you. That confusion is exhausting in a way no amount of achievement can ever fix, because you can't win a game using a scoreboard that belongs to someone else. Marcus's answer to this was never feel better or think positive. It was a daily discipline, the same one he practiced through wars, plague, and betrayal, and it still works the exact same way for a promotion you didn't get or a feed full of people who seem further along than you. The walls tell you what's actually yours to defend. The gatekeeper stops a verdict before it's allowed to redecorate your sense of self. The view from the top shrinks the single comparison back down to its real size. And the logbook turns the whole thing from a courtroom into a record, something you can actually check instead of just feel. 3 things to carry out of this, straight from the same notebook he kept by his bed. A daily question, every morning before anything else. What part of today actually belongs to me? A warning sign to catch yourself by. The moment you hear yourself say, I'm not enough, that's not a fact reporting in, that's an unchecked verdict walking through the gate. Stop it there, every single time. A micro action, every night before sleep. Write down one thing, just one, that you fully controlled today, regardless of how the day turned out. That's your logbook entry. That's the entire practice. You will probably still feel that drop in your chest the next time someone your age announces something that makes you feel behind. That's fine. Marcus felt it too, almost every night, running an actual empire. The difference isn't that the feeling disappears. The difference is what you do with it the moment it shows up. Whether you let it walk straight through an unguarded gate, or whether you finally stand watch at the one wall that was always yours to defend. You were never behind, you were just guarding the wrong wall.